Welcome to episode 3 of the Great Valley Writing Project podcast. My name is Brett Ashman. I am the co-host of this very wildly successful, popular podcast, along with Maddie, who's my co-host as well. I'm going to briefly introduce myself. I know you all know who I am since you all been watching this, but I'm the director of the Great Valley Writing Project. Like I said, I teach at Stanislaus State in the Liberal Studies Department. Oh, there's another person. Anna left and came back. So I teach in higher ed. I love doing what I do. I teach writing courses and I teach like an intro to education course as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Maddie to introduce herself.
Hey, every follower out there, because I know there's many of you. My name is Madeline Sines Payne, and I currently am teaching freshman and creative writing at Ceres High School. It is my 12th school year, but I was an instructional coach for 3 of those years, but I really honestly missed the kids, so I came back to the classroom. I became a teacher consultant with the Great Valley Writing Project in 2016 when I went through the Summer Institute because I was nominated actually by Anna. So she brought me to this world, and I'm currently the communications coordinator. I'm the co-host of this podcast, and I am the Summer Institute director moving forward. So Kendall, can you tell us about yourself?
Hey, my name is Kendall Irey, and I am a teacher in Lincoln Unified School District at a continuation or alternative education high school called Village Oaks High School. I teach ethnic studies and world history right now. I am in my 7th full year teaching. I also wear the hat for my district as the vice president of the union here, and I am the content area specialist for University of the Pacific. So I work with their going to be social science teachers someday. So that's who I am.
Kendall, when did you go? How many years ago did you go through the Summer Institute?
It's a long time. It's got to be.
Oh, this is 17 or 18?
I think it's been 5 or 6 years. I think I did it as my 2nd or 3rd year teacher.
Okay. And then, so thank you, Kendall. I'm going to transition to Cara. Cara, and forgive me, but did you go the same time as Kendall?
So Kendall did it 1 year before me as like a pre-institute.
Yeah.
And then again, went through it again with me. So I definitely know it had to have been 17, 18, that school year. So yeah, that was when I joined Great Valley Writing Project. But I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Cara Bauer, and I am an English teacher for Modesto City Schools. I teach at Grace Davis High School. This year I'm teaching 9th grade and 10th grade CP English, and then also one section of intervention for reading. And that's exclusively with 9th graders.
Perfect. Thank you, Cara. And Anna was going to introduce herself next, but she's having some tech issues. So Maddie, do you want to do your best at introducing Anna?
Yeah, Anna teaches ERWC here at Ceres High School with me. She is, which is 12th grade. I don't know how many years she's been here, but she's been here the whole time I've been here. So at least 12, I know that much. And she's our department chair. And I honestly am not sure when she went through the Summer Institute, but like I said, she was one who nominated me. So I'm very grateful. And I might have nominated you guys subsequently. So it might be like a whole domino effect going on here. But yeah.
And then just for the people watching, the CP that Cara mentioned is College Placement English. And then Maddie mentioned ERWC, expository reading, writing.
I think it's curriculum.
Oh.
I should probably know that.
Reading, writing. Is that correct?
That sounds accurate. We have that at our high school too. So I would say.
Let's see if Anna can tell us we're correct if it connects. Anna, are you with us?
I am. Can you
Hello.
hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So Maddie just kind of introduced you, but we were arguing about ERWC. What does ERWC stand for?
Expository Reading and Writing Course.
I said curriculum. I was close.
You were close. You were close.
It's all the same.
Maddie did a good job introducing you, but would you, so we can get your personality, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. This is my 30th year 29th teaching high school students. Not all of it has been at Ceres High where I currently teach, but I passed the point where Ceres is the school I've been at the longest a couple of years ago, which I didn't realize for a while there. I teach ERWC, 5 sections of it currently. I've probably am more familiar with that than a lot of people are because I worked with it in the draft stage when some of the people in Great Valley Writing were actually helping write the curriculum when it was in its first inception. So yeah, I'm pretty familiar with the whole philosophy behind it, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the fact that it's topical and kids seem to get into it, and that because it's so topical, you can often find current things going on that the kids are willing to discuss and that you can bring in to get them interested.
So
Yeah.
sorry, Anna, 3 brief,
Sure.
I don't know if they'll be brief, but you triggered 4 or 3 follow-up questions. One of
Sure.
them is, you said 5 sections. How many students is that? The second question is, you said 29 years of your 30. What was that 1 year? What were you doing there? And then where can people find out more about ERWC? Is there a spot you would send them to?
Let's see, in order. The 1 year I wasn't teaching high school, I did 1 year teaching junior high at YOLO Junior High in Newman. I'd already taught 10 years of high school, and that jump to junior high was too much for me. I still firmly believe after that 1 year that people that teach junior high, it's a calling, like becoming a Buddhist monk or priest or nun. Where people could find out more information about ERWC, there is a state-run website that you have to join. I would say a good place to start would be also with maybe somebody within the this people could email me questions if they wanted to. I know a lot of the different school county offices have information about it. I wouldn't know who to begin to send people to, however. I can send you the link if you don't have it, Brett, if you wanted to put it up somewhere to the CSU kind of clearinghouse for that stuff. People would have to join and you have to have a password and all that, but it's there. They want new teachers to take training to be able to teach that course. When they did their new version, their 3.0 a couple of years ago, the 2 other ERWC teachers went with me, and we didn't necessarily find that training all that useful for us, but that's the case I find with most textbook trainings that I've been through in my life. I think they can point you to where all the stuff is, but you kind of have to muddle through it on your own and make it work for you and your kids.
That's interesting because my 3009 class, I teach the writing for teachers. We're going through the syllabus today, and part of that, the main component of that class, the outcome that we want is for them to develop their identity as a writer, so that when they go to teach writing, they're not looking for curriculum that tells them this formula, but they're developing things because they feel they are a writer, or they believe that they're a writer. So that's cool to hear too, and it connects with what I did today. So our topic today for this podcast is a very heartwarming, uplifting topic, which is the pandemic and COVID. So Maddie and I were thinking about, what could be the next podcast? And I think it's good timing right now to be talking about this because, knock on wood, it does feel like we're transitioning out of this, hopefully. Kendall has feelings about that. And I believe that we're getting into the endemic stage of this. And I'm fingers crossed that that's where we're going. So I would like to start with just a check-in with everybody. And the question is, where are we all in terms of teaching amidst this pandemic? And since we can kind of, I'll throw it to Cara first, and then we can kind of just jump in however we want to, or if I need to, I'll start prompting people, but I don't think we'll need that. Cara, where are you at with all of this?
So I'm just gonna, I would say for sure, I speak for myself and my peers at my site. We are in survival mode at this moment. We still are getting hit pretty hard by absences. So it's a constant roller coaster at the moment. And it's just trying to reach kids as much as we can. I mean, we just actually had a staff meeting yesterday talking about how our stats look this year compared to the last 2 years. And we're really battling chronic absenteeism at our school. So that is a concern for us. So it's really just trying to get the kids to buy in and, hang in there the best they can. We had 3 weeks off at winter break. And then after that, a lot of us didn't get to come back because it was like, oh, we're getting hit with COVID, or you had an exposure, or whatever the case may be for that kid. So it was like 5 weeks that they weren't in school. And so then it became like, oh, well, now I'm really, really behind and I don't know how to catch up and I don't want to be in class anymore. So that's our biggest hurdle at this moment.
So I'm going to jump in. I'll talk for a moment, but I want to go, when you say survival mode, I'm interested if you can define that for yourself with what's going on. One of the elements I put was absenteeism as part of, like, if you were to define that for a paper. So what you just said, though, reminds me of the 14th is when we're supposed to go back together at Stan State, like in person. But I was able to put a plan together and start on the 1st. And so I started the semester in person and I was like, oh, things are going to go well and everything. And the second session, so I teach Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the Thursday of a class, we had an exposure. And so 13 students couldn't show up this week. 12 were there. So I had class today. There's 12 students in a room of 150 seats. And the other 13 were on Zoom on the big screen. And so I know when we go back, everybody comes back on the 14th, you're going to have just that one student that I had probably had 4 classes that day if we were all in person. So then that, just domino effect. So my point in that is I can empathize, and I'm sharing something similar. But to go back to the question of the survival mode definition, would you add anything to it besides absenteeism, dealing with that?
So for teachers specifically, I would say it's dealing with, I don't know what you guys all call it at your site, but for us, it's COVID folders. We have to do, it's daily assignments for any and all kids who are absent. So if you have a kid who's in your class who's been deemed absent, you have to make sure there is a folder designated for that with an assignment in it that day so that they have access. And then it also means changing, because I've had to change my lesson plans. It's a daily occurrence because I'm like, well, I have 20 kids missing out of my 39 class of 39. I can't possibly deliver this lesson in a way that I was meaningful to begin with because half of them aren't going to get it. Mm-hmm. And then, the other part of that is juggling the grading part of it is because grades were due this week. So then you're like, okay, so I know that half these kids were gone, which is why their grade looks the way it does. How do I make sure that I'm not killing this kid's grade, but also giving them fair opportunity when I think it's something like 20 something days they have to make up for it? At that point, it's like, do I even remember what I assigned? So it's just juggling a lot. And I think that at this moment for us at our site, we were like, okay, let's just do what is just essential. Mm-hmm. Are we doing something that is valuable in the classroom every day? Are we able to show up and give the best presentation of ourselves to our students, and then just being able to make it to the end of the day?
Cara, I think everybody here is nodding their head in agreement because we're all kind of experiencing that. When I say we're all kind of experiencing that, I don't mean myself included. I'm getting a little taste of it. But I said that a little bit just now in my answer I gave you, and it's I've been doing this for 2 weeks, right? So and I've been teaching online prior to that, and everything's been, whatever. So you guys are in a way different class. So kudos to you all. Kendall or Anna, did you want to add to that?
I just had a question for Cara. Is part of the teacher survival mode Do you also feel like from leadership, you're sometimes getting conflicting messages about what your role is, whether it's to give grace and let them make it up, or push hard because we know they lost 2 years of learning and you've got to get them up to speed?
Right.
Do you feel like you guys get that too?
Yeah, we're constantly being bombarded with like, oh, there's all kinds of learning loss. So we need to make sure, like they're telling us, utilize your PLC time, talk about what our students should be learning and what's essential. But also at the same time, it's like, oh, well, we're trying to pass as many students as we can. So therefore, don't hold everything accountable because that might, hinder the kid from wanting to try and reach their graduation requirements or whatever it is. But also like on a teacher level, it's also like, hey, self-care is really important, but also did you get your COVID folders done? Like, there's just all kinds of wishy-washy back and forth, and I understand that they're all big problems, but it feels a lot like it's fallen on teachers' shoulders. And I have a feeling that other people in here feel that way too.
I definitely empathize with all of that and echo much of it. I think it's slightly different because I teach in an alternative education high school, my class sizes are capped. I have much smaller class sizes than probably most people sitting here. And that is like a benefit, except for that our students are among the students who struggled the most in distance learning because they're relationship oriented students. They don't have great support systems at home. Things really just imploded. Like our graduation rate has tanked. Like there's just been a lot of things that were like very significant. And so we were always a relationship oriented school, which has helped. But I think the problem is that I would add to that survival mode is it's like, I don't know if teachers can handle anything else. And like, oh gosh, I'm going to cry. I have like inside information that we have more things coming down that are like what Cara is having to do because they want to say, we don't want to put any more on teachers' shoulders, but also we have to recoup ADA. And if we can't recoup an ADA for people who aren't in the education realm is your average daily attendance. And it's how we get our money. And with all these COVID absences, they had sort of ignored that we were losing all this ADA. And so what Cara's district has been doing in Modesto City is they've always been on top of making sure that they were having a means to recoup that ADA. But our district had kind of tried not to put more on teachers and had not done that. Well, as that amount of money is mounting, there no longer is an option to not seek to recoup those funds, but who that will fall on is teachers. And so now it's like there's these conversations about synchronous instruction and like, are we going to have to go back to synchronous instruction and what does that look like for students and what triggers that? And those are conversations that I'm privy to and I feel I can share here because eventually they are going to become public conversations. And I literally, the day that teachers hear those conversations out loud, I know that we're going to have teachers who hit a breaking point that is like, I can't do one more thing. And so for me, survival mode is also this, like, I don't know how much more we can pivot. Like, I think that teachers have been asked to, like, that word, pivot, so many times in this pandemic. And we have become so concerned with what it is doing to our students' mental health or, how can we intervene? And so many people are having those conversations that I don't think enough people are having the conversations about what's going to happen when we can't staff schools anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think people think I'm being alarmist when I say that, but I'm very, very confident that in the next 12 months, that's going to be the conversation we're having is we can't staff schools because no one wants to be in this profession. And the teachers who were great and loved it don't have it in them anymore.
Can I just ask?
Sorry.
No. Go ahead, Cara.
I just wanted to know, because we've already done the synchronous thing. Are you guys required at series? Are you guys doing the synchronous? Okay. Well, every Wednesday,
a lot of districts.
Every Wednesday we do synchronous learning for any and all kids who are at home. So that's another, when Kendall's talking about, I can't add one more thing. We were asked to start doing that back in
I think it was
I wanna say it was
October.
like
You guys have done it a
October.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been since October, I want to say. And basically every Wednesday we have collaboration day. So we have short periods that day. So for 30 minutes of our period, we have to be on the computer teaching those kids synchronously with our students in the classroom. But you can imagine with freshmen who are, at a maturity level of like seventh grader this year, it's challenging. It's not ideal, but what's more frustrating is that we feel a lot of times that we're doing all these things and setting all these interventions in place, and no one takes advantage of it. I set up all these daily assignments for all my students, and I have one or two that complete them. So it's more just like wear and tear for the teacher. I feel like to do all these things and feel like it's not working and no one is doing it, but we're doing it because ADA, like what Kendall said, ADA and all of those other reasons.
So I want to touch on something real quick. This is a little tributary, but has anybody read iGen? So this is about the current generation. This Dr. Twinge, she is out of San Diego State, and she labeled them iGen because of the phone situation. Really, really, really good text. And it reminded me what Cara just said about like maturity level. She actually shows that like 20-year-olds are now, for example, this isn't the right 13-year-olds, and young people are playing things much more safer. They talk about drinking, sex, all those things that like they used to do and be like take risks. Young people aren't doing that anymore, and how there's positives to that, but there's also negatives to like not doing that. And so I want to just mention that as a plug if you guys are interested in checking that out. It's a good one. Anna.
So going off what you were bringing up about that author Twinge, my kids read an article about that when we were talking about phones by her earlier, when we were talking about Beautiful Brains. It's one of the units in ERWC, and it talked about the pandemic and the addiction to cell phones and how it exponentially like just blew up with this generation before the pandemic, and how much worse it is because of the pandemic. But the other thing I find interesting about that comment about how they're more cautious and they're not taking some of these risks is, as a teacher of writing, right, I see that as well. They are much more, can you read what I wrote? Can you tell me if I'm doing this right? Will you read this sentence? Is this right? Whereas in my past, as a teacher of writing, I would have kids take risks, or they would not want me to read something until they could like identify the problem part for me of what they were writing, where they were stuck. These guys, they write one sentence and they want me to check it. They're that cautious. And because right now we're in a language, gender, and culture unit. And so I chose to start with talking about generational differences. Mm-hmm. And so we had been talking about the post-millennials, or the iGen, versus Gen Xers like me and millennials, and their different teachers and where the communication problems would lie. And I said something about them being more cautious. And they said, yeah, I can see that. I am like that in my classes. I want the teacher to tell me. And then they talked about how, well, you're super direct as a Gen Xer, Mrs. Daniel. So you want to know exactly what we want from you, but you don't want to read the whole thing, give us feedback on it before you score it. And I go, yeah, we've had those conversations. I'm not going to pre-score it before I score it. I'll help you and give you direction, but I'm not going to read over the whole thing and then read it again until I need you to do something. But I don't want to like read it 15 times before you actually give it to me.
That's super interesting, Anna, for two reasons, and there's probably more than that, but one of them is I feel like such an idiot now. I was reading this and I was thinking, because she wrote this prior to the pandemic, and I was reading this and I was like, part of what she's talking about is the social isolation that this generation has because of technology, and I was thinking like, oh my God, this just exploded even more so because of the pandemic. So I was like, that's something I was connecting with you on. But as someone who teaches writing, who's the director of a writing project, I never thought about this generation, how this connects to their writing. And you're absolutely right. Like my college students, they want to know, they want that like pat on the back, like you're doing good. They want that encouragement. And the students, I've noticed that the students, the writing that I really enjoy, that is like a breath of fresh air, is a student who could care less what I think, is like, I'm going to take a risk and this is going to be exciting. And it's like, oh, wow, this is interesting, as opposed to, 90% or whatever the number is that you want to look at for the class that writes like, Ashman wants to hear this, so I'm going to regurgitate this because it's what I'm used to. I'm going to play it safe. That's super interesting. That's something I want to think about more. Thank you for that, Anna.
I've tried to do a lot more choice, as I think we all do. The literature says, that, and students will push back and they're like, why do I have to pick what I'm learning? Like, tell me what you want me to know and I'll tell you that I know it. And I'm like, no, but don't you want to like learn something that you're interested in? They're pretty much like, no, like I want to know what you want me to know. And then I'm going to tell you that I know it. And it's just so interesting because this wasn't like this year. Like I used to do choice assignments all the time and students would say, oh, can I do this instead? Like, I really have this idea for a project, or I want to do this for a project, and they'd be excited about it. And a lot of them are still, but there are those students who are just like, why do I have to tell you what I want to learn? Like, I came here for you to teach me, so just tell me what you want me to know. And I'm like, but I don't know everything. Like, you can find out some interesting things and tell me. So we just finished a You Teach Me unit where all the students had to pick their own topic and question and research and then teach us. But there was definitely some like, and some of it wasn't even just tell me. It was like, I don't know how to tell you what I'm interested in. Nobody's asked me what I'm interested in. Like, how do I know what even to research? So it's interesting hearing them kind of push back against that.
They do not tolerate ambiguity in choice well at all.
I wonder where that's, oh, sorry, Cara, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, like, it seems like I feel like I've been trying to be more creative in my assignments to make them less dull, less boring, more interesting, more creative ways I can sneak in the writing so they'll do it. And then I get the pushback, like, this is too much thinking involved. Like, you want me to think and like make up ideas. I'm like, yeah, kind of.
But I think that's
so much pushback.
It was interesting too, because I'm interested in what you guys think about this, but I feel that I'm like that in certain areas of my life, where like, as the director now, I have a lot of responsibility. There's budgets, there's like, certain grants, and you're supposed to do this, this, and this, and, creating contracts and stuff. And I never once, like when something comes in where I need to like confirm or approve something, it's never at an email response immediately, like, oh yeah, put it in this grant, or, it could go here. It's always like reaching out to 2 or 3 people and getting the okay for them and being very, very cautious. So there is this like sense of, I don't want to screw up, and I don't know if it's because I want to keep my job. Obviously I want to keep my job, but like, I think it's more of like your reputation. And I'm wondering if young people, do you think maybe because of social media, there's a reputation that they're putting out there and they're more cautious because they can be cautious with who they are online. And so maybe they want to be cautious in other areas. I don't know. But it's interesting.
Can I okay, this is another one where I'm like, man, I just teach a very different human because like my kids are not cautious people. They are like, and I would say that the pandemic has made them like really reckless. Like, but I think it's the population I teach, right? Like, I could totally envision how the pandemic, being who I was as a student, could have made me very cautious, and like that would have been very different. But I teach these kids that essentially like spent like 2 years at home with no supervision, and like no one really cared, and I don't know. Anyway, I just think it's an interesting like difference between hearing your guys like, oh yeah, that's totally how my kids are, and I'm going, wow, my kids were always kind of crazy, and now they're just like even crazier, even more willing to push boundaries, even more willing to like go places that I'm kind of like, I don't know how to respond to this because I never thought I'd be put in this position. So,
well, so for sure, Kendall, I get that, because I have my student population I have some that are similar to yours, and they will talk about anything that I'm just like, do you know that I'm standing in front of you when you're saying
like,
this?
Drug use, alcohol use.
Absolutely. They'll tell me their whole life story. However, when it comes to me, but when it comes to me giving them an assignment and saying, here, I want you, like, for instance, right now we are creating dating profiles for 2 characters in Fahrenheit 451. They have to come up with dating profiles. So they have to like use characterization and like make the perfect profile so that they'll be desirable to other people. And my kids are just like, well, how do I know? And I'm like, well, you have to find the stuff in the book and you have to like be familiar with what the book talks about. And they just don't want to do, like, they're like, that's too much thinking. Like, I have to be creative to do that. And I can't do that. So it's like, it's almost like they are at that point that we were talking about. Like, I can't take one more thing. I feel like they're there too. Like, you're asking me to do one more thinking task, and I've already been asked to do 5 other things in all my other classes. I can't do this one more thing.
My seniors, rather than talk to each other about what they're doing, because we just finished 2 books of Hawkeye, My Life as a Weapon. So they finished reading this comic. And so now they had to like take the idea of a subverted archetype and choose something they know well, and then convince us it was this type. We thought it was this to begin with.
You're freezing.
Evaluate it, right?
Oh, you're
Yeah.
back. You froze a little bit. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
So they had to pick something. And they're just like, can't you just tell me? Can't you just give me an example? And I'm like, sure, here's your example. I'm going to use Shrek, but you can't use Shrek now.
I was going to use, but it reminds me, both what you and Cara are saying it reminds me of, I know Maddie's talked about this and I'm wondering if I'm in my mind as the host, I'm trying to bring back to the pandemic and make that connection, but I'm wondering about because early on we talked about this, like, decreasing of expectations and accountability and stuff. And I'm wondering if you think that's playing a role in when you're asking to do something, if they're recognizing are already aware that I know you need butts in the seats, and I know that I'm going to pass this class, whether, I do this or I'm creative or not, or if I put this extra effort into it. So can you just tell me the bare minimum and let's play this game and let's get through this? Is that a fair assessment, or do you see that?
Absolutely, I see that. I think that a lot of our kids did nothing the prior year and then did credit recovery, and credit recovery was a snap. Like, they just busted through classes. They made up those classes, no big deal, because it was really simple and basic, like just get the work done, get it turned in, and let's get those credits up. And then they came back to class and, we were all like, okay, we're going to bring them a new sense of normalcy. So let's go back to what we were doing the year before. And I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but my kids did not know how to talk to each other, and they still really struggle with that. Group work is a very big challenge in my class because they just do not know how to talk to each other on any other level than what's on social media or like what they did over the weekend. Those things they can talk about. But if I ask them to focus on an academic topic and work in a group together, that's just not there for them. It's just I have to really spoon feed it to them, and it's exhausting for everyone involved in that activity. But I think it was like, well, we didn't have any high standards last year. And I think they still know that they can kind of get away with the bare minimum again this year, because we're not doing super extravagant things because we're in survival mode. Right. So it's just like this vicious cycle that we're going through.
Yeah.
Sorry,
go ahead, Ken. I would like to say that I see that, but the seniors I have, when they were sophomores, they also didn't talk. So it's like a weird year for me with seniors, because I know that about them from pre-pandemic, because as sophomores, their teachers was like, I planned all this stuff for discussion, and they just sit there. They don't say anything, right? So I don't want to attribute that behavior for my seniors currently. I would say if you ask me that next year, I'll have a good gauge on it. But because this class is weird, or has been always weird when it came to discussion, from what I've heard from my coworkers, I don't know that that's a pandemic thing as much as it would be an iGeneration thing with these guys. I don't know. Yeah. I'm sorry, Kendall. I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're fine. I would say that I see that a lot with my 10th graders, not, I mean, they're happy to talk and they talk incessantly, but they don't want to talk about work and they don't want to really have to invest in any work. I don't see that with my 9th graders, but I don't think it's because of them as 9th graders, because what I hear from other teachers is they don't do it in their classes. I think it's the unique position that I have with ethnic studies. Like, kids are really bought into ethnic studies. They're really excited about ethnic studies. I get to teach them about things that like they've never learned about, but they think are really fascinating. And they have a lot of opinions about. And so I feel really fortunate that I've gotten to have that class this year. It's new to our district, and it's really gotten to show me, like, most of my colleagues think that our freshmen are nightmares. And I think that they are just such bright, wonderful young people. But I think that that has to do with my curriculum. But when I have them as 10th graders, if I have to teach them the same boring 10th grade curriculum that no one cares about, I think that it'll be the same. And I feel bad saying that, but the difference of, like, I get to teach you units about like identity and what is ethnic studies and systems of oppression and things that are really fascinating and meaty, but that you see in your real life and care about, versus like, now I'm going to teach you about imperialism. And like, it really matters. And it does actually matter today, but like, it's very hard to see that through line. It's difficult. And it's difficult for them to care. And I think as we're all in survival mode, it's more and more difficult for me to muster up my, like, I can care enough for both of us. I'm like, I don't know that I can care enough for both of us. I think you've got to care.
I think what you're hitting on though, Kendall, and you're using ethnic studies as a throughway to it. But one of the things that I believe is Tom Newkirk said was that he had a teacher, a history teacher, who was so passionate and loved history that he said, I couldn't tell you anything about history. Like, I don't remember a lot about history, but what he did teach me is how to be passionate about something. And I think I know students pick up on authentic human beings who are authentically excited about something, as opposed to someone who just has to go through the motions. And so I think where that leads us is, as educators, and I actually said this in my writing for teachers class today about writing, whether you like writing or not, you have to start being a writer and being excited about writing, because your students are going to see that and they're either going to say, this person's BSing me, or they're going to say, oh my God, look at, they're excited about this. Maybe I should look into this a little bit, just like with math or history or ethnic studies or whatever the case. Maddie, sorry.
I was going to say, my PLC partner told me that a student during summer school said that what did he say? Every day I acted like what I was teaching was the most exciting thing I've ever taught. And he was like, even though most of it was really boring, like, you couldn't help but listen, because it was like, you'd be hurting my feelings to not listen because I was so excited about it. And I think that, like Kendall said, it is harder to get that, like, when you're just so tired and like all you can think about is the next thing you have to do, the next thing you have to do. And I've been trying to be more cognizant, because I would catch myself like, okay, I need you guys to do this. And then I like answer an email, and then I had to go check on them, and then I do this. But there's just so many tasks. Like, I've never been buried under so many tasks before, that it's like, I feel like I'm splitting. And so I've had to be very intentional on, like, I'm not going to do that right now. I'll write myself a note and I'll have to come back to it. But it is really hard when there's, you have to sign this contract by this date, and they're sending you this email and this, and you got to do this, and then so many things. But yeah, I think that feigning that enthusiasm is part of what we do. It just gets harder the deeper we have to fake it.
It's funny because Rita Pearson in her TED Talk, which I love, always says that we're actors and actresses. And I think that connects with what you just said. I'm just looking at this bulleted list of questions I have for all of you, and we hit number 1. So I'm going to move us along as a host, and just to be aware for you guys on your own personal lives, we're not going to get to all these questions. I'm not going to keep you here till 10 o'clock tonight based on our trajectory so far. But I'm just kind of looking at it and seeing like what I can take out, what I want to leave. What I want to go with next is, what are some positive observations you have made during the pandemic? Like, what has been good about the pandemic? I know that seems counterintuitive, but I think there have been some good. And if someone wants to jump in, go ahead. If not, I can start us while you're thinking.
Well, I can definitely say that I still have been able to make connections with kids. And I will say this, that last year we were digital most of the school year, and there was not a single student that I struggled with. I liked every single one of my students every single day of the school year. Maybe that's because they were not able to be annoying in my classroom. But I had no students annoy me. I liked them all. And then when we were able to be in class together, it was actually really kind of nice and endearing because it was like this like meet and greet that we never really got to have. So that part was nice. And I will say that this year I still have been able to make meaningful connections with students, and that's always positive.
Yeah, and I think that speaks a lot to you, Cara, as well, because we all know not all teachers are doing that in person, let alone online. Someone else want to jump in?
I think there's a couple of things. I do think that a positive has been to show people, you know, how resilient kids are and how resilient teachers are. And I think there were a lot of teachers that had to make themselves comfortable with technology in a way that like they never imagined. And I think that has been positive. Like there are some tech things that I use now that I, you know, didn't before that are better. I think on my best days, I appreciate it more, you know, in a way that I think only when you've had something taken from you can you appreciate it so much. And so, you know, it's harder on hard days,
Yeah.
but on the days where I really go back to like how devoid of life teaching felt like when we were by ourselves, like when I sat in my classroom and like no one turned on their camera and I talked at myself for, you know, 30 minutes each period.
Mm-hmm.
I then remember that like how much I missed the sound of kids like talking and like being stupid and me having to discipline them. I missed that. And so in some ways I think that is positive. You know, to realize that is something I love about my job. I love interacting with kids in person. And it was nice to be reminded of that could, you know, be taken or it could not exist and that it wouldn't be the same, that my job wouldn't be the same if I didn't get to talk to kids in person. Yeah,
Kendall, I want to amplify what you just said, because you got me choked up just you saying, and I can hear it in your voice too, the importance of it. But I told Annie, like, if this is what it is, I'll go do something else with my life. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I did 3 semesters online, and this 4th semester I had to go in person because I've never failed as many students as I did last semester ever, and it felt horrible. But it is like, I told my students, like, I know when this mask comes off, whenever that is, and I'm actually going back to normal again, I'll probably have like an emoji, like I'll probably cry in front of all of you because I miss so much the interaction and the drinking coffee and walking around and like, hey, how did you watch the game last night? All of that stuff, and walking on campus together, going to the office and just like not talking about school, not talking about advising, just talking about like, you know, what's going on in your life, all of those things, seeing your colleagues, all of that is a big part of what we do. And so I think that's a great, I told Annie and other people that I feel like a tiger in a cage, and I can't wait for like that cage to open. And it's like, wait till you see what I do when this cage opens. Like, it's going to be amazing. The other thing I'll say, and I think this is just a note for me, but the idea of tech, that was going to be my addition to this. And I think it'd be good for GVWP to like reach out and maybe do like a Google form and see if there's people who want to do like Kindle, take like 10 minutes to share on, you know, record yourself showing what you learn tech wise, and then other people do the same thing. And then we can create a little like series so people can check those things out. I think that's a great idea. Anna or Maddie?
I would say a positive came from me re-examining what I do with my curriculum and what I want to try that's new and what I want to keep. Mm-hmm. I was the only one of the teachers on my staff that, or not staff, in my PLC that wanted to try Hawkeye this year. And it was one of the new additions to ERWC. And I had so many kids that when they came back from semester and saw that book sitting on their desks, like, seriously, you're having us read a comic book? Like, they were just amazed. They were like, we're not going to read the whole thing. We're only reading 2 of them. Can I check this out? I want to finish reading this. Like, kids that never are excited about reading. So there was that. And I guess another positive was I also wasn't afraid to approach my principal about doing new things too. It'd been a while since I'd gone and wanted to be kind of like the underground rebel and try some new things, but like go in with the research in the back, and be ready for the questions about, is it going to be worth it for you to give up time for this, to do this? Like, and how are you going to justify us doing this?
Mhm.
And like I said, because I had some, like another staff member, but not in my PLC, in my department, that wanted to do this. She went in, I went in, and we got some new things going between her and I we're kind of like the rebels in our PLCs right now. But that's good. It's good. Not so rebellious. We're like we can't like compare data. We
Right.
can, just differently.
Yeah. I think that's a good teacher aspect, though, is like the teacher who goes against the grain for the right reasons, not just to be a jerk, but for the right reasons, to do something different. Thank you, Anna. Maddie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
One thing I wanted to add is that in addition to the graphic novels, my kids are eating up my poetry books this year. Like, I've never had so many kids, because I don't even know, will come in and see my stack and they're like, can I check that out? Can I take this? And they'll come back, do you have another book like this? So I have to build up my poetry. So that's been cool. And I don't know if that's because it's similar to like text messages, like they're quick, but that's a sidebar. I think the positive right now, and I was having a conversation with my student teacher about this the other day, is like, I'm really as horrible, I don't know if that's hyperbole or not, but as horrible as this pandemic year has been, it's really reminded me, like, I enjoy the kids, kind of like what Kendall said. Like, it's reminded me, like, I love to be around my students. Like, I really enjoy being here. I don't like all the other stuff. I don't like all the other tasks, but I think when I did intentionally pull myself away from those tasks, remind myself, like, you wanted these people back in the room, so like you need to be paying attention while they're in the room. Not that I wasn't, but it's really just reminded me, like, I enjoy being here. Like, I love what I do. I am so fortunate. And I hope that whatever is coming down, I mean, I've seen what's going on in other states. I'm not going to go super political, but it's a scary time for teachers, and I'm hoping that it stays positive. But it does scare me at the same time. Sorry, I know this was supposed to be a positive. I went on a bird walk, but I really do. I've thought about, like, in the midst of the pandemic, like, what else can I do? Like, I can't do this anymore. And at the end of the day, like, I love this. Like, I love coming to my classroom. It's my happy spot. Like, I love joking around with the students. I love hearing their ideas. So I just hope it can stay. I hope all the shifts become more positive. If stakeholders are watching this, if you could give us smaller class sizes, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Amen.
So-
Cara, you're 39. I don't know how you do it, but I have one class
Amen.
of 24. And when a bunch of them were out, some days I'd have like 15. And it is such a different classroom when you have 15 students versus 35. So anybody who says class sizes don't matter has never been in a classroom to teach before.
I want
Yeah.
to make sure I don't know if we need to come back to it as a question or not, but I want to echo, because Kendall said it too, and I appreciate that she said she didn't want to sound alarming, but I think Maddie touched on it, and I think it's important specifically for any emerging educators that are listening to this. The idea of, it's like, these are teachers right here who are in the trenches right now and are very concerned, correct me if I'm wrong, but are very concerned about this whole thing falling apart because we may not have enough teachers to continue this. That's something that hopefully we look back, in 20 years and be like, oh my God, do you remember 2022? Like, we were on the brink. But that's something I think that we need to really pay attention to and think about, which segues me into my second to last question, which is something that has frustrated me, has upsetted me, or has been upsetting to me, which is there's been a lot of money pumped into schools, and we've had 2 years of where we are currently. The question is, how can we be better prepared for a future pandemic or something like this? Because from a blue collar mindset, where my family comes from, construction, maintenance, bus driver, that kind of stuff, it's embarrassing in a way that we're 2 years into this and things aren't getting better. And with all the money, especially, that's been pumped in, my answer briefly, coming from someone who did their doctorate in educational leadership, is, and it's been something that I've noticed from the leadership has been, in my opinion, poor. There's been too many, well, maybe this, maybe that. And there hasn't been this hard line. This is what we're gonna go do. Part of that, to be fair, is because we're all kind of like putting the plane together as we're flying it, because we don't know, what's going on. This is the first time we've experienced this. So the question is, and I'll stop myself there, do you guys have any ideas about, if this, God forbid, happened again, or something similar happened, what would you suggest to leadership? Hey, we're getting into that range again. We need to do this, put these things in place so that we don't have such a bad experience again.
I have a perspective that maybe isn't popular or is different, because I was, for those that don't know, right, my job during the pandemic was to be the lead negotiator for like the MOU for COVID-19, so like, which is a memorandum of understanding where it's like, these are our working conditions, this is how we're going to be treated, blah, blah, blah. And I think one of the biggest problems with school districts in general in the state of California, I assume all over this country, is that bureaucracies aren't agile. Like, bureaucracies are meant to exist in like, this is the box that we have been built for. We can only exist in this box. And like, we struggle to pivot. And so in a period of time where like pivoting is what is required, so like at the next point that we hit like a pandemic, I think everyone needs to take it seriously quickly, and then be willing to do things that don't fit inside the box rapidly, even if that makes you uncomfortable. Like, we can't spend 6 months arguing with each other about the best way to do it. Like, we're gonna have to just do it and agree that, workers deserve some protections while we do that, and not fight about that. Like, we don't have time. And I think that we wasted a lot of time deciding if it was gonna be serious. And then we weren't investing the energy in the right spaces. So I think that there was a lot of people who were in a lot of power not investing energy quickly where they needed to.
Would you, Kendall, I genuinely appreciate, and I think we're very fortunate to have your perspective here, and I appreciate your take on it. This is something that Annie and I talk about just in privately, Zoom's off, people can't hear it. But my thought is like, there's a lot of, and I think I'm coming up with a new phrase or term right now, but bureaucratic bloat. And in terms of administration, where like education way back used to be teachers in the classroom with their students, and you have a principal, whatever the case. It seems like where money's being spent and where things are growing is that administrative phase of things. And I think, again, I don't know, but my gut is telling me that because of that bloat, when this kind of thing happens, going back to your point, you have all these places and routes and things that need to go certain ways. And so things are taking more and more time, rather than, for example, to be, on the other end of it, this is our school. We have 5 of us, we have our students, we talk to each other, we move on with things, and it's done with. Now you have so many different avenues and stuff. And it sounds like that's what you're getting at too. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair. I mean, I think that it's also the lack of desire. Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, I just think that the way that the education system, I would say even arguably the way it was created initially, it wasn't created to be like, look different than it looked. Like, people get uncomfortable when it has to look new. And I would say that for almost all forms of education in our country that are like state run or state funded in some capacity. And I think there's lots of good reasons for that, right? Like, it makes sense that we have rules matter. Like, we should make sure we're servicing kids. We should, all those things are fine and dandy. But when it comes to emergent situations, they don't move quickly. And like, and someone has to say, you can throw away some of the boxes. Right. And even right now, like this bandage that we're trying to put on ADA, or this bandage that we're trying to put on, like, the system needed to change. And at the point that the system needed to change, no one was willing to do it. Because what does that mean for what normal returns to? And those are the questions. So it's like, I think that anyway, sorry, the longer I really digress, but I think the bigger conversation that needs to be had is, this was the time to reimagine what education looked like, and we didn't do it.
Yep.
So why are we not going to keep having these conversations? I think really the solution isn't to put this on the back burner until we hit an emergent situation again. I think the point is this emergency brought to the head a lot of the weaknesses of an education system. So who's going to be the smart people that we're going to bring to the table to start engaging in a dialogue about how the system has to change? Because it wasn't good before. It was broken before. It just was a broken that everyone was used to. Mm-hmm. And now it's like broken and imploding. And we're like, well, it's going to be normal someday. But I doubt that. So I think that we need to have a conversation.
I'm Kendall, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. And Maddie, I'm not going to say it, but Maddie knows already what I want to talk to you about. But it's very political and I'm not going to get into it on the podcast, but I will once we stop recording. Cara, sorry.
I just was going to say, the pandemic put everything into perspective because there was nowhere for you to hide the problems that existed. Parents saw it, administrators saw it, community members saw it. We all were very, very aware of everything that teachers could no longer deal with on a daily basis because we were not with them. And it's just, their answer was, well, let's just go back to school because that will just put the Band-Aid back on and then we don't have to see it anymore. We don't have to deal with it anymore. And one of the major things that I dealt with all year last year was mental health. And this is just one very small component of it, but it was one of the major things that I noticed in my classes. And still to this day, we still have a very real problem with mental health and access to mental health. And, you know, I just think that we have all of this funding and this opportunity that we could be using to really be helping those kids who have those struggles and, you know, for families who are dealing with things. And again, it's just a Band-Aid. They just put the Band-Aid back on. We're back in school now. We're going to leave it for another day when really it was a huge opportunity to actually address the problems that were in classrooms, because we all know as teachers, we've been coined psychologists and therapists and everything else under the sun. And it was just like, that was not something we could do. You know, I had some very real situations last year where I had kids in crisis and I could not get there to help them. And there was no one who could get to them, you know, and all you could do was sit and stare at a screen and be typing messages back and forth to them, trying, you know, hoping that they're going to be okay. So that was a huge, huge thing for me last year, was that mental health was at a very, very weak point. And it's not to say that those weren't just brought on by the pandemic. Those problems have always existed and we've been dealing with them. And it's just now, again, shoved into people's faces and we still have not addressed it.
Yeah, and I think, Cara, the thing I always touch on too with that, and you hit on it, but I want to emphasize too, is this idea of like, it was shown, it was revealed, but even now you're saying, and I wasn't there to be able to help them, and which is great. That's what we do, right? As teachers, like we want to help our students. But what I tell my students, when I tell any educator I get the chance to, Cara was not sent to school, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you weren't trained as a psychologist or a therapist. You were trained to be an educator. And so when these school districts or these schools or leadership tell you about how much they care about mental health of their students, they need to be held accountable to actually caring about mental health by putting money into the system, if that's what they're going to say. Not when you look up a school accountability report card that says therapist, counselor, psychologist, or whatever, and it says 0.5 of a person. That's not going to cut it, right? So anyways, that's my little soapbox on that. But I think you're right, and that's one instance of it, Cara, but all of a sudden it tore back that Band-Aid, to use yours, and showed like, here's what we're dealing with on a daily basis, and these things need to be addressed. Anna or Maddie?
I'm kind of going to go back to what Kendall was saying about the whole structure needing to have changed to deal with the unique situation. But what shouldn't have been the message that was given out was that the time spent in school to educate, I'm not sure I'm going to communicate this well, so pardon me if it comes out poorly. I feel that a lot of students got the message that because of the pandemic, the education part of things doesn't matter. I'm marking time. Mm-hmm. And when a student knows that rather than what they need to learn throughout a semester can be disseminated down into 8 days
Mhm.
for that same amount of credit to equate to learning. That's the message that the public gets, that teachers are babysitters and they're the psychologist and they're the nurse for my kid and they're the this, because what they're actually teaching my kid is just the side benefit. And without that pivot to deal with the lack and to get kids up to speed, because 30 minutes a week right before lunch isn't getting it done
Right.
in those intervention periods that we have. But the message of we're going to lower the graduation requirement, we're going to waive this year of these requirements, that reinforces that what we do and what a kid is to gain from school educationally is also not valued.
And students are aware of that. They,
Oh,
they,
yeah.
they receive it, they perceive it, they're aware of what's going on. I was going to say too, prior, and I don't know if this is your experience too, but prior to the pandemic, one of my biggest concerns as an educator was getting students out of that checklist mentality of like, I just got to do this, this, and this. And so again, similar to the iGen, the social isolation that probably was amplified. I think that same idea of like checking through things, because that's interesting, Anna, this idea of like, they're even more aware now of, oh, I can do 8 credits, 8 units in 30 minutes compared to, or whatever it is, right? Compared to 16 weeks or whatever. And so they're also, if that was the case prior, now we're moving even more so to the transparency of, okay, just get this done. And then also seeing educators more in the light of, can you just do this so that we can pass you and move on, rather than educators as that caring educator who's helping you grow as a human being, not just get you through to the next stage. And they pick up on all of those things. And you guys know that. Maddie, before I ask the last question.
I don't have anything new to add that I haven't spun my wheels about a million times. I think Cara mentioned it earlier. I was really hoping when we came back, this would be the opportunity to overhaul. And it just really hasn't. And that's kind of disappointing. Instead, it's been well-intentioned shifts, but not appropriate for where we are right now. So I was hoping that like smaller class sizes and different things would have been implemented to really support our students. But it's really hard to watch National Guard come and sub in different states and bus drivers subbing and feeling like, I applaud those people. I'm very happy they're there for the students, but it just feels like we're not really here for the students' education at that point. It's a roof over their head and food. And I just wonder, as a society, how have we come to a place where so much is placed on schools that in a pandemic, we have to open our schools, even if it's not safe, so kids can get away from abusive households, to get access to food, to have mental health services. Like, why is all of that the schools catch-all? And I think if we can disseminate some of that and have better systems set up, we can do our jobs. But we wear so many hats that it's really hard, and it's really discouraging to see like, oh, thank you, 18-year-old fresh out of high school with a clear background check, for watching these students for 8 hours. And are they really learning? Is it really about learning at this point? So sorry, I didn't want to say it, but you asked me. So
no, but I think Maddie, what you're touching on too, and I think the overarching message, one of them throughout all of this that we're not saying, and I think you said somewhat, is we have a societal issue right now, issues, and school is part of that, or education is part of that. But I think, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but value systems, morality, where we are as families, all of those things and connections that we're making with people, being able to like, pay for housing, pay for food. All of those things have an impact on what that student comes into your classroom with and what you come into that classroom with to help those students and the support you have. So I think if we had to have like this an umbrella of things that need to be addressed, I think that's a major part of it. And I think we're all, students and teachers, are noticing that and recognizing that. The last question, and I'm going to say the order if that's okay. Cara, Anna, Kendall. Maddie and I have decided on the podcast that we'll always end with a make-believe student, emerging educator named Jeremy, who is going through the LIVS program right now, or the BA, and going into credential program is getting very close to getting his or her own classroom. And keeping in mind the pandemic, overarching topic for today's podcast, what advice would you have for Jeremy, the emerging educator?
Well,
and you can't say run the other direction.
I know. I guess my advice would be that student relationships are the most important part of the job, because if you don't have the relationship, those kids will not learn from you, and they won't, they have to have the buy-in. And anymore, it's definitely a day-to-day thing where I know if that kid does not value me as a human being in their classroom, they're not taking anything from me. And, it's that building relationships that is the most important part. Everything after will fall in line, but getting the ability to connect with your students is like the most important part of the job.
Thank you, Cara. And I know you were thinking in that line, but I'll add the not only valuing you as an educator, but you valuing every one of those students. That the fancy term, if you want to sound really smart for those watching, reciprocity. It's tough to say, so make sure you say it before you say it in front of other people. But reciprocity is the idea of like, you and I both care about each other, and we both are aware that you're on a life trajectory, Cara, and my students on a life trajectory. There was somebody before they came in my classroom. There's somebody right now that is going through something in my classroom, and they're going to be somebody else when they leave my classroom, just like I'm in the same boat as a teacher. And I think as human beings, if we can understand that, I think we'd better serve ourselves, our students, and our students better serving us as well. You already know how I feel, Cara, about relationships. So thank you. Anna.
I'm just going to add on to your reciprocity with Mandela's Ubuntu. I am because you are, right?
Beautiful.
And I probably butchered the pronunciation of that. I would say that essentially as a teacher is a sense of humor. Even in the pandemic, there were times I laughed so hard with my kids online. I'll never forget, we were talking about where people were going, if they were going anywhere on vacation. And I'm half Portuguese, but I had never heard this till my Portuguese student said it last year. He said he was going to Portuguese paradise. And I said, where is that? And he said, Pismo Beach, Mrs. Daniels. How do you call yourself a Portuguese? So I would say somebody entering the profession, keep your sense of humor. And the other thing I would say is to, I do this, and every time I've had a student teacher, I've told them to do this as well, which is to keep a self-esteem file, which is emails from students or their parents, or a card from them, from an administrator, from a coworker. And when those times are hard, because last year I was pulling those things out and reading them when the camera was off to keep me going.
Yeah.
I had to change my background just to right there. That's my file right there. All the cards. I think there's a bunch from Anna in there, probably emails I've printed along the way, but I 100% agree. I probably don't pull them out and read them as much as I should, but it's there every day. I can see it when I walk in, and I add to it as much as I can.
So just to reiterate, it's called a self-esteem folder is what.
That's what I have mine labeled. It's right in my teacher desk drawer.
No, it's very smart. I had in my office at DBH, I have a huge cork board. I actually had to get a bigger one because every card I put on there, and I had a colleague who told me like, oh, what are you showing off? Or you need to build your ego up. And I said, that right there, I have to see every single day. And that keeps me going. It keeps me like, not going in the motivated sense, but it reminds me of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I can 100% agree. You also reminded me of it's called Pando. The Pando, it's the largest living organism is a aspen tree, one tree aspen forest. And so there's a forest of aspens, but they're all connected underground. And when I saw it the first time, it reminded me of education and being a teacher, and how we're all these single people in that classroom. But I think if you're doing education right, you're all underneath, you're all grounded and connected by something. So I think that's a good way to kind of look through the teaching lens. Kendall.
A couple that I always tell everyone, and I'll try to make it quick. The first one is there is something to love about every kid, and you have to find it. Like, there will be kids that are so hard that you're like, no, this is the kid. I can't find anything to love about this kid. And someone told me that when I was a new educator, and it was the best piece of advice I've ever been given, because there is something to love about every child. And when you find that thing that you love about that kid, when they're like grading on you and you don't know how you're going to survive to the end of the period or the end of the day, that's what gets me through. And kids deserve to be in a classroom with people who love and care about them. And so you have to find it. You have to find it for your own inner peace, but you have to find it for that child as well. The other one is learn how to say no, especially early on. As a new teacher, people will ask you to do a lot of things, and you need to create your own peace and your own balance. And just showing up as a new teacher is enough. It is, because you're making lessons and you're learning how to do all the things. And so learning to protect that peace when you're new is so crucial. And it's the time where people feel the need that they have to do it. You have to show up to work and do your job well. And so sometimes that means saying no. And then the last one is find a community that fills you. So, and that's my plug for GVWP. But I genuinely give this a piece of advice to all my social science candidates, as I say, oftentimes that doesn't happen on your campuses. I mean, we can love our colleagues, but our colleagues exist in like the crap day that we existed in. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes they can't be the people who fill your bucket. And so find people that fill your bucket and then make that a priority. And I was guilty in the last couple of years due to, personal situations that made it that I avoided this community because it filled my bucket, but it also made me sad. Whew, I'm good. And I could feel it. I could feel it in myself. I think we all felt that in the pandemic is those communities are so important. So as a new teacher, make sure that you find a community that fills you and make that a priority. That is something that you should say yes to. So those are mine.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you're saying say no to things, I was going to say, but not to GVWP, say yes to that. No, but you hit, I think all of those are really good points, Kendall. And I'll add to that last one, if you don't mind. And it's something I learned as a young man when I started being around men that were successful and that I looked up to. Recognize the people that you're surrounding yourself with. And this isn't to be that cold-hearted person, but if that person is bringing you down or taking away, someone in my grad class called it energy vampires. If they're not contributing to you, and not in a selfish, egotistical way, like not everybody has to be contributing to you all the time, but if the majority of the time they're taking from you and it's not helping, it's not improving your life, be aware of that too and make a decision about those things. And then try to surround yourself with those people who care about you and want you to do well and want to help you improve your life. And this reciprocal kind of relationship. I think a lot of times people think that they're supposed to be nice to everybody and welcome everybody in their life. And for me, at least, that it helped me tremendously when I started recognizing who is my support system and who was unsupportive and who was supportive, and surrounding myself with those supportive people. So I think I appreciate that, Kendall. Maddie, you're co-host with me, so you don't have to answer it, but is there anything that you're thinking of?
I think that everybody kind of touched on this in one way or another, so I'm just going to reiterate it, but the kids, and I don't mean that in a sense of martyrhood that, you have to sacrifice yourself for the students, but I think the pandemic really reminded us why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. and don't forget about them in all of everything else. And it sounds silly because that's why we show up every day, but it is easy to fall into the trap of like, I need to get through this class period so I can do all this other stuff, when really this class period is why we're here, and all this other stuff we can get through. So don't forget the kids. And also what Kendall said, like, especially now, it's relationships aren't enough at some points. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, that sometimes you can give everything into a student and they're not at a place to meet you. But if you follow Kendall's advice and find something about every student, you won't fake it anymore, if that makes sense. Like you'll genuinely truly love each of your students. And I'm trying to teach seniors next year. Anna knows this, so I can come back to my babies who we left with when they were freshmen. So I'm really hoping I can have that opportunity to kind of rekindle some of those relationships that I didn't really have a chance to finish. So that's my hope. But don't forget that you're here for the kids. I mean, take care of yourself too. But when you're here, that's why we're here.
I'll finish with two things. One of them goes off what you're saying, and it struck me when I read the article the first time, but Neil Noddings talks about care theory. And I always talked about, when I was teaching freshman comp, I was like, oh, I care about my students and I build these relationships with them. And one of the things she said in care theory is, you can send out care. If that student does not send it back to you, you do not have a relationship with that student. And it doesn't matter how caring you think you are. If they don't give it back to you, there's no relationship there. It's just you giving to them. And so I think that's important to think about for you, but also for them. Like if a student's sending you care and you're not reciprocating that, it's also something to think about. The last thing I'll say, my piece of advice that has helped me through the pandemic, as I was doing the doctoral program through the pandemic, is exercise. You have to, and where I'm going as soon as we're done is for a run. And it's a habit of mine every single day, except for Sundays is a rest day, but that was my way to work through a lot of emotions. Kindle is my reason for working through emotions today now. But I need to do that. Otherwise, that's just like, you can't just push that stuff down. It's going to come out eventually. For me, lifting weights, going for a run, getting on the bike, something like that helps me work through those things. So if you catch yourself in that situation where you're stressed out and you can't handle anything more, try a walk, try a run, and see if that makes you feel better at the end of the day.
I just have to add on to that really quickly.
Please.
Kendall and I did this crazy thing called 75 Hard last year during the pandemic. Quite honestly, it was probably it was life-changing but we walked outside because one of the workouts had to be outside. So we had to be outside every single day. And even though on days when it was like raining or cold or windy or whatever, it made the nice days when the walks were so beautiful and everything. It was such a stress relief.
Yep.
So I definitely can echo that one. And it also is nice for us because we were doing it together and it felt like we were accomplishing something together. So that was really cool.
Yeah, 100%. You reminded me of, I defended my dissertation, turned Zoom, turned it off, celebrated with Annie, put my shoes on because that was the day for my run. And I went out and did my run, and it was such a beautiful run by myself, being able to like just process the last 3 years and all that. So I highly recommend. It doesn't mean everybody has to do it, but give it a shot. And I think you'll probably find a benefit out of it. Any final closing words? All right. Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate all of you. It's wonderful to see each of you and to check in and connect with each of you again. I'm going to do the closing on this. So if you like this video, like, subscribe, share, hit that bell notification. Sorry, I watch YouTube all the time now. And so that way you don't miss out on any upcoming content. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you on episode 4.